Hi, my name is Stephanie and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be answering the age-old question of whether or not you should do a PhD or go onto the job market. I myself faced this question about a year ago and 2 years ago as well. I was wondering the exact same thing, and in all fairness, the thing that makes this question so incredibly difficult is that there is actually no wrong answer. I endlessly made pros and cons list, and in this video I will share a general version of that because obviously mine were quite personal to my circumstances, my degree, and all of that combined, but I'm trying to make it so that you can all use it as sort of a starting point. Please do keep in mind, because we do sometimes tend to forget this one, that you're actually allowed to apply to both at the same time. So you can in fact apply for PhDs and for jobs and pick the best offer. It's a possibility that you can do. I took that route personally because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, so that for me was the most helpful one. But still, please do keep in mind you can apply for both. You don't have to make a decision right now and only apply for one of the two routes, because sometimes the difference just is in the details. So first of all, the huge elephant in the room, which is that a PhD is a huge commitment. In the UK, generally speaking, it's about a 3 to 4 year commitment, and if you decide to do your fully funded PhD in the US, it's going to be a 6-year long commitment, which means that for the next 4 years, this will be what you will be doing. Essentially, that is not a great phrase, but you get what I'm saying. But this also means that you getting on a job market will actually be delayed by these 4 years, or the time that you're spending on your PhD, essentially. This all could be a disadvantage if in the end you decide not to use your PhD, because it will put you 4 years back on the job market, and then essentially you will be competing with students who are a bit younger than you are for the same positions. And in terms of a job, if you don't like your job, you can essentially just find another one, which is definitely easier said than done, but it works that way. While a PhD, you're sort of stuck with it. On the other hand, while being a PhD student, word already sort of says it, you're a student. You get to live that student life, you get to sleep in, stay up late, have midnight crises in the library, and all these things I do sort of miss, in all fairness. Essentially, you will trade your incredibly flexible schedule for a 9 to 5 job, if it is 9 to 5 and not 9 till 7 or later, but you get what I mean. You lose all of that flexibility in your schedule. You most likely will have less time for your hobbies. Another major annoying part about doing a PhD, which especially is the case if you're a humanities student, is funding, aka money. You've got to pay for your PhD, which is slightly less expensive than a master's degree, but still it is quite expensive, and you have to pay for your living expenses. So it's not just your tuition fees, but also your living expenses and your laptop and the materials that you use that you have to calculate into this equation. And the trouble is, if you're a humanities student, it's very, very difficult to find funding to fund your studies. However, if you're doing engineering, for example, it's way easier. But still, if you would work and have a full-time job, you'll get a full-time job salary for somebody who graduated from a master's degree, which will probably include that you're able to buy yourself a bit more luxurious items or a bit more of a luxurious life. For example, no more flatmates, or that new laptop you so badly needed 3 years ago already. So being a PhD student will essentially mean that you'll have to live on your student budget for a bit longer. For the next 4 years, you'll be stuck on that student budget again. And if you're a humanities student, you might struggle throughout your entire PhD to actually find enough funding to cover all of your expenses. One thing that very much frightened me to go out on a job market was actually sort of the unknown, because for the last 5-6 years, I have been a student. I have lived student life. I know how it works and I love it. So stepping out of that world into the job market, which in all fairness you'll have to do anyways, even after your PhD you'll have to grow up, but in all fairness, taking myself out of my little comfortable zone onto that job market and having a 9 to 5 job or having that structured schedule, to me was a bit frightening, because it's something new for me and it's not something that I have experienced before. So that was a bit scary for me, in all fairness. So I think that the familiarity sort of brought me real close to a PhD as well. Moving on from that student life definitely felt as opening a new chapter in my life. I sort of closed that chapter for me being a student, and now I have to start off on this new chapter in my life working full time. It's weird, right? Another thing that's somewhat connected to the whole familiarity thing is I love my subject, and honestly I wouldn't mind spending the next 5 years really diving deep into my subject and learning everything I can about it and spend the rest of my life researching my favorite subjects. But then again, a new role at a new company is again that sort of unknown factor in it. Like, you don't know if you're gonna like it, you don't know how it will like sort of fit in with you. It's again like this scary big new thing, right? And you won't know what it is like until you've actually properly given it a try. In all fairness, you probably will only be applying to roles that actually pique your interest. Honestly, we highly recommend don't apply to jobs that you're not interested in, because you might actually get an offer from them and then you're stuck with that job that you're actually not interested in. So please only do apply for jobs that you are actually interested in, because it makes your life way easier. So you're more likely to actually like the role that you end up in. But again, it's something new, it's something unfamiliar, and it was something that I didn't know how I was going to react or respond to. So after you finish your PhD, you still will have to go and find a job, because, you know, adulting, growing up life, that sort of thing. And the thing is that it will most likely be a research position that will be linked to a university or is at a university, maybe teaching students, something along those lines in most cases. Like, definitely not all cases, there's definitely like exceptions out there, but from my humanities perspective, this is sort of the way it is. The problem is, however, is that there is a limited amount of spaces available for these types of jobs, and that is a bunch of PhD students, and in my case that would be modern languages, who graduate with a modern languages degree, who then want to move on and teach at the university, right, and keep on doing that research, which means that there's a very limited amount of students that actually graduate with a PhD that end up in a role like that, because unfortunately humanities we're shrinking at uni. Less people decided to do a humanities course, so also the jobs are shrinking essentially, which is very sad in my personal opinion. So essentially this means that even if you finish your PhD, you're not guaranteed a job, while starting out on a job right after you graduate from your master's or your undergrad is something that will give you a bit more stability in that sense. Another thing that weighed quite heavily on me was the fact that a PhD is actually always an option. You're never too old to do a PhD. It's that simple. You can be retired and do a PhD, you can be mid-40s and decide that your finance career is not for you and therefore you want to do a PhD in French Lit, you know? Everything is possible. You're never too old to do a PhD. However, I found in my tons and tons of applications to graduate schemes that most likely, if you read what all of these companies are looking for, it's generally speaking an age limit at like 25, 26, or students who have graduated within 2 years from either an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree. And all of these little things actually exclude PhD students. Obviously, there are graduate schemes out there that are open to PhD students, but they're actually quite limited. And that for me actually meant that graduate scheme in that sense, or direct entry roles specifically geared towards students or internships and that sort of thing, is quite time limited to your first 2 years right after your master's degree or right after your undergraduate degree. And therefore a PhD doesn't really have that limit in that sense. So you can also give it a go to go do something totally different, and then maybe later on decide that maybe, you know, your finance career was not for you and now you're applying for PhDs. And lastly, I was not really set on what I wanted to do in the future. I actually had no idea, and there's tons of people like me out there. You finish your graduate degree and then everybody is like, oh, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So in all fairness, that's totally fine, but it did mean that there was a chance that I would end up eventually with or without a PhD in a job position that would not necessarily require me to have a PhD in French literature, if that makes sense. Especially if I, for some reason, cannot find a job, because you're not guaranteed a job after your PhD at a university to do research and to teach students, which was sort of my plan. So in the end, I was like, that's an option, that's something I would enjoy doing, my PhD is actually needed to do that. However, there is quite a small chance that I will actually end up doing that because of the fact that there is so little positions available, and therefore there's actually a quite large chance of me ending up doing something totally different that does not require me to have a PhD in French literature at all. Obviously, this one can be totally different for you, because there is so many roles out there in the world that actually require you to have a PhD. So this one is probably quite personal to myself, and also the fact that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So maybe take that one with a grain of salt, and maybe change that one to your liking. So these were my major pros and cons that I looked at when deciding on what on earth I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I hope this video was helpful to you, and definitely go make your own pros and cons list, and definitely also think about the fact you can postpone that decision when you get all of your offers in from jobs and PhDs, because sometimes that just makes a difference. Like a fully funded self-funded PhD offer is definitely a different offer than a PhD offer where you need to find funding for yourself. So honestly, see what offers you can get and make a decision based on that. That's probably the best advice that I can give, because sometimes it's just in the details. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.